you're really trying to control. Similarly, again, those of you who work with kids with emotional behavior disorders, they will go for 4.5, 5 days with brilliant behavior, and then they'll rip your throat out on the 6th day, right? All right, it's not the rate, it's the high intensity variability. So part of what you're looking at is if you only do a rate measure, you say, well, we only, modify the rate a very small amount. You say, yeah, but it equated to about 5 gallons of blood that we saved, right? So it ends up being, you want to be careful about the pattern that you've got. So let's do this. Do this real fast, okay? I know most of you know this. That's why we're going to do this the fast way. But you need to get engaged. The room's too hot. Unless you actually are doing things, we're going to lose out. So take a look up here. So is there a functional relation? So we're not talking about just descriptive. We're talking about an actual causal experimental between reading fluency instruction, the independent variable, right, and the reading comprehension assessment, dependent variable, and what we want to look for is level. That would be an example of a functional research question. Make sense? All right, so here we go. Here's your task. I want you to write a research question. Here's the problem. We are going to deal with kids who have had traumatic brain injury and have lost the ability to walk with a proper gait. So we've got kids with gait imbalance, and they're having difficulty walking. We actually want to reprogram some of the neural muscle sequences that are occurring there. And we've built this measure called the Gait Precision Index. And it is a combination of several features that measure the extent to which a gait follows a normal sequence of muscle patterns. The independent variable goes like this. When we have this kid walk on land, she or he has difficulty maintaining a proper gait. They go off sequence. But if we put them in water, so now they're in water up to about here, when they walk, they're getting proprioceptive feedback that is very, very different. And they also have, from the water, a support system. It is a way of learning, right? So the question is practicing through water walking, if you do that over time, does it improve the extent to which your gait index improves? Make sense? All right, write the research question. Four features. Is there a functional relation? Right? Dependent variable, improved gait. Independent variable, water walking training. And increase in the level of GPI scores. Great. Now what we've got is a research question that has the level of precision that's going to actually drive things. It also is going to indicate what you're going to measure. You're always going to be measuring the dependent variable. And from now on, you're in most cases going to be required to measure the treatment integrity of the independent variable. As our independent variables have become more sophisticated, we're going to be asked to build measures related to how those look. So one of the things that we're interested in is the extent to which we can actually build abracadabra research questions that will allow you, part of what I'm going to argue is when you're talking about single case methods, the research question, the measures that you choose are as important as the design and the other pieces that you're looking at. Measurement and structure are critical. Now, second, quick digression, and this is really important. If you are preparing a dissertation at the University of Oregon, or if you're preparing a grant application, one of the things that you're required to do is to define the logic model or theory of change. So it's not good enough to be able to say what it is that you want to be able to change. You need to be able to argue for why this works. So, and this is going to be really important. Remember I talked about how one of the critical features of single case methods is the ability to adapt, ability to adjust. You will not be able to adjust unless you are able to describe how your study fits within a larger model. So I'm going to use the word logic model. Other people use different words for similar ideas. There's nothing magical about the language or the ideas. The issue is many people describe logic models in such a global fashion. You know, we are going to do good by altering the likelihood of bad, and we want goodness to prevail. Okay, I want you to become more precise. So here's what I want you to do. A logic model defines the independent variable, the multiple context variables, but it also sets up the opportunity to describe the mechanism. From now on, a science of human behavior is not just this will change that. It's this will change that via this mechanism. I want to know the social, psychological, or medical mechanism that you believe is responsible for the change that you've got. All right, so think about it this way. And this has really, I think, been helpful to us in the past. If you want to do science, always start with the dependent variable. Don't ever start by saying, I want to do a study on self-management. Don't start by saying, I want to look at pacing of instruction. Start by saying, I want to look at the self-regulation of kids. I want to look at the literacy skills of kids. Start with the dependent variable. Start with something your mother would understand is being important for making the world a better place. If you start there, and you start now with a socially significant content area, then what I want you to do is to say, what do we already know as a science, as a community? Remember I talked about putting knowledge on the table, and we're all going to agree this is a piece of knowledge. And we all agree to that piece of knowledge. We're using scientific methods to make this more than something that David says, but something we all agree on. All right, if that's the case, what do we already know are variables that affect that socially significant outcome? What do you know? And you don't have to do everything, but I want you to write down what you have looked at in terms of the field. Remember, all of your professors ask you to do the literature review. It is not just an obstacle for you to do. It really is the place to say, what do we actually understand as a field? When you do the literature review, you should be able to build that picture. I want you to be able to write. This is a variable that is really important for society. It's important for our culture. It's important for our families and our children. Here's what we know about those. Now, if that's the case, I want you to say, this is the variable that we don't know quite as much about. And in most cases, you know what you're going to do? And I love this. You're going to be working with families, with schools, with communities. You are going to say, here's the knowledge that we as a field have. But from the experience I've got, I think this is something that I know that's not currently part of what the academy acknowledges. That's where you do science. You don't do random things. You teach us, you do us the honor of systematically teaching us those pieces that are in the gap between what we've agreed we know and what you've learned. That's the way in which we'll really get real advances. All right, so this is the variable you're going to manipulate. See that arrow? The arrow is the mechanism. If I manipulate this, I'll get change in that outcome, and this is why. But, and come on, this is the thing that I think we miss in way too much, right? That's not the only variable, that's your variable. You love it, right? You're there, you actually know how to measure it. You've been working on it for 2.5 years. It's the one that you really think you understand. But there's a whole bunch of other things that are going on. Those other things are things that you must hold constant. Good science is not just about the systematic manipulation of the independent variable. It's about the careful control so that other variables do not change. Part of what the logic model does is it teaches you what not to do. The other parts is you put the context, both the immediate context and the larger social context. I mean, the constructivists actually have a point, and the point that is important is context matters. And there's the immediate context, and there's the social way in which we construct and understand it. It's important to understand those as co-varying events. They are interaction events. They can affect what goes on. You want to understand, and the more sophisticated we get as scientists, the more we build that into the context. If you're interested in schools right now, one of the real big topics in schools is trauma-informed educational support. I mean, we have finally developed a language system to acknowledge the experiences of children who come from poverty, who come from family contexts that break your heart. They come to school with a learning history that alters their ability to actually take advantage of both the social and academic events. And we label that trauma at this point. All right, all of that's fine, but if we start looking and we say, we still want that child to be socially and academically successful. What are the critical features of a learning environment that will allow that child to be socially and academically successful? Well, we can actually identify some of those variables, but we've got to define them in the immediate context of his or her home life and in the larger context of the societal situation to be able to appreciate the way in which those variables come together to affect that student's learning history. That's what makes social science work, all right? So in part, I want you to define something with a level of complexity that actually makes it a socially important phenomenon, and then I want you to study it with a precision that allows you to say something of substance. The alternative is to describe something that's really complicated and then to walk around saying, oh, wow, it's really complicated. Boy, it's tough. Boy, it's really complicated. We have no sympathy for that very much. All right? I want you to change the world, and I want you to use science to do that. That doesn't mean you don't honor the complexity. It means that you honor it, but you have the self-discipline to examine what goes on. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to actually build a logic model. I want you to say, the reason we're going to build a logic model in part is I never want you to run one study. One single subject study will not change the world. So from now on, if you're going to be working with a professor and you're introducing a single subject study, I want you to always talk about a program of scholarship, a research program. So if this is your issue, the content that you're focused on, this is study number 1. The other variables easily set up studies 2, 3, and 4, right? So one of the great things about a logic model is it shifts from doing an individual study to a program. Second, it improves the precision of the research question, which has how many parts? 4, all right? So you know the 4 parts of the research question. It's going to tell you what to hold constant. So if this is the variable you're going to manipulate, these are the variables that you're going to be very careful. In fact, you might even measure them to demonstrate that they're held constant. It's going to help you to describe the precision that you need with measurement. And when you get research results that do not fit what Mia told you they would be, you don't throw yourself off the Capitol building. You back up and say, what does the logic model tell us about how we do adaptations to make that work? So part of what we're really learning is we're learning a lot about how to use single case methods with greater precision and efficiency. Now those of you, especially if you're interested in looking at teacher behavior, one of the things that I worry a lot about, we like to do intervention studies where we say, here's the intervention. We actually introduced this variable. The change that we're looking at is in teacher behavior, and the effect of changing teacher behavior is to get change in student behavior. Be careful to avoid saying the intervention, we're going to provide a workshop to teachers, and our dependent variable is student behavior. All right? That would be logically inconsistent. The workshop is designed to change teacher behavior, unless